Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Please join us today in the study of Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we'll be studying Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 28, Jñāna-yoga. Hare Krishna. Please join us for Jara Mother prayers. Jai Radha Madhava devotees, please join us for Mangalacharan prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirye Shratam Swakatha Kṛṣṇa Punya Shamana Kirtanaha Hridayantasto Bhadrani Vidhunoti Sahasratam Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatir Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Kṛṣna. So today is Ekadashi, Indira Ekadashi. Happy Ekadashi to all the devotees and everyone. So it's a very auspicious time, and even a small effort in hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and chanting His name, and it delivers us from this material nascence, this ocean of birth and death. So this is a very important day. Today it is also called, Ekadashi is also called Madhav Tithi. So here this is very auspicious, and it also gives birth to or reawakens our true consciousness, Jivera Surupaya Kṛṣna Nityadas, on our Sanatana Dharma, reestablishes us. Hare Kṛṣna. Please join us in the recitation of the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 28. The title of the chapter is Jñāna-yoga. And so in this chapter, we will be covering how to truly serve and love Kṛṣna with knowledge and realizations. Hare Kṛṣna. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Parasvabhava karmani.
Parasvabhava karmani.
Na prashamsena na grahet.
Na prashamsena garhet.
Vishwamekatmakam pashyan.
Vishwamekatmakam pashyan.
Prakritya purushena cha.
Prakritya purushena cha.
Please.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Parasvabhava karmani.
Parasvabhava karmani.
Na prashamsena garhet.
Na prashamsena garhaye.
Vishwam ekatmakam pashyan.
Vishwam ekatmakam pashyan.
Prakritya purushena cha.
Prakritya purushena cha. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said.
Para.
Para.
Anyone else's.
Anyone else's.
Swabhava.
Swabhav.
Nature.
Nature.
Karmani.
Karmani.
And activities.
And activities.
Na prashamset.
Na prashamset.
One should not praise.
One should not praise.
Na garhayet.
Na garhayet.
One should not criticize.
One should not criticize.
Vishwam.
Vishwam.
The world.
The world.
Eka atmakam.
Eka atmakam.
Based on one reality.
Based on one reality.
Pashyan.
Pashyan.
Seeing.
Seeing.
Prakritya.
Prakritya.
Along with nature.
Along with nature.
Purushena.
Purushena.
With the enjoying soul.
With the enjoying soul.
Cha.
Cha.
Also. Translation by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one should neither praise nor criticize the conditioned nature and activities of other persons. Rather, one should see this world as simply the combination of material nature and the enjoying souls, all based on the one absolute truth. Purport. So this is a very beautiful purport with some amazing realizations being revealed here of the acharyas and the devotees. Material situations and activities appear to be good, passionate, or ignorant according to the interaction of the modes of nature. These modes are produced by the illusory potency of the Lord, which is itself not different from its master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So a devotee of the Lord remains aloof from the illusory temporary manifestations of material nature. At the same time, he accepts material nature as the potency of the Lord and thus essentially real. The example may be given that modeling clay is shaped by a child into various playful forms such as tigers, men, and houses. The modeling clay is real, whereas the temporary shapes it assumes are illusory, not being actual tigers, men, or houses. Similarly, the entire cosmic manifestation is modeling clay in the hands of the Supreme Lord, who acts through Maya to shape the glaring temporary forms of illusion, which absorb the minds of those who are not devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna. Please join us for Guru Pranati. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarine Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripa Tadaham Vande Shri Gurum Dina Taranam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So this chapter summarizes the knowledge that we have been studying in Srimad Bhagavatam, throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, along with in Uddhava Gita. So this is part of Uddhava Gita, right? From chapter 6 to chapter 29, it composes part of Uddhava Gita. First 5 chapters in 11th Canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is more like setting of the scene, and then the last chapter is more like, the conclusion aspect. So here it is summarizing how to truly serve and love Krishna with knowledge and realizations. And one of the important aspects that we just read in the purport is that the material energy and external potency of Lord Shri Krishna, Mahamaya, she is real. However, the manifestations she takes, those are illusions. And just like from a clay, a child can make different kind of shapes. Yet at the same time, those shapes, like that of a man, houses, and tiger, are not really man, houses, and tiger, but they're just, some symbols that remind us of man, houses, and tigers. So similarly, the various, illusions this material energy creates, because when we get this body, we identify with the body, and that's an illusion. We are not the body, we are the spirit soul. The body is the vehicle that we get. And we have been so lucky to get the human form of life, because the human form of life is the perfect boat to cross over this ocean of nations. So we should take every opportunity to engage in devotional service. So when in the purport is said, and Lord Krishna, he is continuing, the bhajan kriya, so deity worship, the previous chapter, he is continuing from there. And all of a sudden he changes this topic to avoid illusion. So sometimes people ask, why is this sudden switch of topic? Because we were talking about the glories of deity worship in the previous chapter. Yet the last verse is where Lord Krishna says something which is, why we should pay attention to this fact. That this material energy is real, but its manifestations are unreal. They are temporary and they, drive away. The dualities drive away in time, as well as thinking that the material energy is separate from Lord Shri Krishna, that the various sense objects are for our enjoyment. Thinking in that manner It is very important to understand a delusion. So that is hallucination. Just like sometimes after driving for 10 to 12 hours, people start hallucinating, that they are stationary and the road is running and the trees are flying away, So that kind of hallucination are being created in people, in material consciousness. A person in material consciousness gets bewildered. This is where it has suddenly made that switch. And this switch is because of the last verse of the previous chapter. In that verse, Lord Kṛṣna says that one who takes away the property of a Brahmana or of the deity. So if one has given something to the deity, sometimes we take various kind of offerings to the deity, and then we want to make the offering, but it's really not for the deity, it's more for us. We ask the priest just to show it to the deity and hand it back to us. We have to be very, very careful, because we want to really offer it to the deity and accept the remnants. And when we take more than the share, then we should distribute it to others. So that is a very important aspect, that one should distribute prasad, because there are amazing glories of prasadam distribution. One who distributes prasad, he gets special mercy of Lord Gauranga, who appears in the mood of Radharani. So who is Lord Gauranga? He is the golden avatar, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He appeared, about 500 years back, and he reawakened, Krishna consciousness. In the Gaudiya Sampradaya, it was always being followed in the Parampara system. But he is Krishna himself, in his golden form, because of the complexion of Radharani. That's the Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavareshwari. So her complexion is golden. So a person, when he is giving something to the Lordship and to the Brahmanas, if he steals it away, if he takes it away, right? If it's given to him, he accepts it, that is great. But if he takes it away intentionally, thinking that he wants to enjoy, then Lord Kṛṣna says that such a person would be born as a stool-eating worm. And how many years? 100 million years. That is so serious. So Uddhava is shocked when he hears. Because Uddhava is a pure devotee and he is very compassionate towards the soul. A pure devotee is always compassionate. So when he is shocked to hear, Lord Kṛṣna reveals why that is so. Because of illusion, because of hallucination, because of relativity, when one thinks that this material universe is for one's enjoyment, right, and not to serve Lord Shri Krishna, then that hallucination causes one to again fall down in this ocean of nascence and repeat in the cycle of birth and death and further fall down from their positions. This human birth is a rare birth that we have received. And we have received very high intelligence, and with high responsibility comes again. With high facilities, high responsibilities come. So one should not praise the conditioned persons, like in this material world for the materialist, who when they are making material advancement, one should not praise them or criticize them. So that is a very important instruction. However, from material perspective, you don't praise or criticize, but if one is a great devotee, right, then you want to praise the devotee. So that is allowed. So when one is properly situated, so this is the mood of, spiritual world, Vaikuntha's and Golok Vrindavan, where a gopi would see another devotee, another gopi is serving Lord Shri Krishna very nicely, and she would appreciate it very nicely, like, oh, she is serving so nicely, I should also improve my services. I should also try to learn from her how to serve better. And what amazing benediction is in the Shastras, that if you remember a great devotee, you get the 100th part of their pious activities, right? So, and that is akarma, right? Devotional service. It doesn't have reaction. So pious activities have reactions, which is, with the ritualistic or prescribed duties without in relationship with Lord Shri Krishna when they are performed, just as a matter of duty. But if something is being performed as part of devotional service, it doesn't have any reaction. So when you think of a devotee, you
get the blessings of the devotee. And you get the blessings of Lord Shri Krishna because he becomes happy. So when we think of devotee, Lord Krishna becomes happy, Radharani becomes happy, all the residents of spiritual planet, they become happy with us. And when we remember Lord Shri Krishna, then everyone, all the devotees become happy. So we should always try to remember Lord Shri Krishna, and remembering him includes remembering his name, form, activities, pastimes and associates and devotees. So that has been extended in this 11th chapter, that we should always try to serve devotees, right? Vaishnava Seva, Nama Ruchi, and what is the third aspect? Jivodaya. Yes, that is very important. Compassion towards the other living entities. It is very important. So, when somebody sees that someone is not performing well, one is materially driven, then being compassionate devotees, they go out to preach and bring them to Krishna's lotus feet, bring them to Krishna consciousness, and following the example of Srila Prabhupada. And when we say following the example, it is Anusharan, not Anukaran. Anukaran is imitating one's behavior. We don't imitate behavior. Rather, a devotee should be very conscious to take shelter of these instructions of the spiritual masters and acharyas. By doing that, one can properly, continue to be in Krishna consciousness and also bring others in Krishna consciousness. And this simply starts with the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And so, an honest citizen, differentiates freedom with prison life, right? They don't want to go to prison, they want to be very honest citizen, they want to follow the rules and regulations and live lawfully. While a prisoner, a foolish person, he is thinking whether the prison has AC or no AC, whether the prison has, bigger floor or less floor area, whether the prison has a mattress on the bed or no mattress on the bed. They are looking at the internal, not realizing that they are in prison nevertheless. So a person who is materially conscious, he is thinking, oh, if I am in the human form of life, I want to become a demigod. Not realizing that demigods are enjoying so much, they're constantly enjoying the life that they don't get the opportunity to engage in devotional service. And they are constantly lamenting that they should be born as humans, because in human life, the conditions on the earthly planets are perfect to be engaged in devotional service. In hellish planet, there is too much suffering. So again, there is pain in the hellish planets and pleasure in heavenly planets. While devotee is satisfied no matter where they are. Yet at the same time, we have received human form of life, which is very auspicious, because now in this state, we are able to engage in devotional service. So in Indra Ekadashi, you must have read the story, the king is carrying out his services very nicely. Just like a father takes care of his children, he is taking care of his citizens. And then Devashi Narad, he visits the king. And then he inquires from Devashi Narad that it is so auspicious. And Devashi Narad asks, how are your 7 limbs? So again, his own welfare, his ministers, advisors, the brahmanas, the citizens, the treasury house, and his army, and the allies. So those aspects, he says, now that you have come, all my sacrifices and all the austerities and charities we have been engaged in, they have become successful. All is successful because we have received your darshan, we are able to see you, we are in your presence. And then he asked Devashi Narad, what is the purpose of your coming? Now this is very interesting. When we were discussing this as we were reading, that sometimes a sadhu or a devotee visits someone, the person is very afraid to ask this important question, that what is the purpose of a visit? Because their mind is that if there is a devotee, he would be asking for some kind of Lakshmi, not realizing that the devotee actually wants to deliver Krishna. So the purpose is that we should inquire because we get Krishna. we get the mercy of the Lord, we get the prasad, right? Kripa. Brahmana bhavite kaun bhagyavan jiva Guru Krishna prasade paye bhakti lata vijay. So again, we are constantly wandering in this material world, from higher planets to lower planets, again, from heavenly to hellish to earthly planets. We are like a Ferris wheel, it's constantly going out. But a fortunate soul gets the mercy of Lord Kṛṣna, who appears in his external manifestation as spiritual master. So Chaitya Guru, Lord Kṛṣna as Super Soul in our heart, becomes merciful to us so that we get the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. And sometimes when we take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, there may be other devotees in the path before we reach and aspire for a bona fide spiritual master. And those devotees make our path easy to approach a bona fide spiritual master. So in the parampara system, so bona fide spiritual master appears in the parampara system. And so a devotee is a perfect boat, as we heard in the deity worship and previous chapters, who can easily deliver us through this ocean of nescience. So again, many times it's very interesting that sometimes the human body is the boat that we can use to cross. The devotee is the boat that we can use to cross. Lord's lotus feet, they are perfect boat that we can use to cross. If you look from the consciousness perspective, living entity, Jivera Surupoya Krishna Nityadas, right? And if we are serving Lord Shri Krishna, we are at his lotus feet. And a devotee is constantly meditating on Lord's name, form, activities, pastimes, and serving his lotus feet. So in aspect, as an analogy, we can relate that all three are looking for the same purpose, to cross this ocean of nescience, to help us get across. So we should be more careful about not falling back in the cycle of birth, death, old age and disease. Dukkha doshano darshanam. Janma mrityu jara vyadhi. Dukkha doshano darshanam. Which means that birth, death, old age, disease, these are the miseries that again and again we have to see if we stay in material consciousness. That's why it is very, with this sense of urgency, we should take to Krishna consciousness. And so this king, he asked Devashi Narad, what is the purpose of your coming here? And Devashi Narad, he is very happy to hear, because now he wants to really come to the point. He says that, I have wandered all over universe. And it just so happened that when I was in the presence at an assembly of Yamraj, I saw your father who was suffering. And why was he suffering? Because he broke his Ekadashi fast prematurely. So that was, and in hellish planets, he is saying that it is not possible to perform devotional service. So this is a devotee who happened to have failed in carrying out a simple fasting. So again, and we say simple because following the parampara system, with the association of devotees, it becomes simple. Otherwise, on its own, if we talk to other people, sometimes they say, "Oh, it is so difficult. How can you stay without grains? How can you stay without fruits? How can you stay without water?" So many other aspects they come into the picture. So Devashi Narada is revealing that your father said that in hellish conditions there is constant pain and suffering. So it is not possible to perform devotional service. So please ask my son to perform Ekadashi, to perform fasting on the Ekadashi. And thus I will be delivered. And the king, he listens to the instructions of Devashi Narada, who tells him the process of how to observe the fast. So today is Indira Ekadashi, which is an auspicious time for us to observe the fast and engage in hearing, about Lord Shri Kṛṣna, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, which is not different from Lord Shri Kṛṣna, and engage in devotional service by calling out, the Lordship for his mercy. So the king observes the fast, as was instructed by Devashi Narada, and then he passes on the benefit from that to his father. And as soon as he does that, what happens? Can you imagine? A person, his father was suffering in the hellish planets. And all of a sudden his father got spiritual body. and he was able to go back home, back to Godhead. And as he was going back home, the king himself was able to see his father going back home, back to Godhead, to Vaikuntha Loka on a Hamsa. So when he sees that, of course, he is very much inspired. So he performs Ekadashi Vrat constantly, and the king himself is able to go back home, back to Godhead. So those are the glories of Ekadashi, which means that we should take every opportunity to get out of this material world. And that is the focus of an honest citizen, an honest, person, an honest human, who should see the welfare of the soul, our own welfare. The highest benefit is to develop the love of Godhead. So that's the goal. And that goal has to be initiated first by understanding what is our relationship, sambandha. Right? Goal is called prayojana, sambandha videya prayojana. Sambandha is we are living entities and we are eternal souls who are eternal servants of Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. Jivera surupaya Kṛṣṇa nityadas. And abhideya is the process. So what is the process? We engage in the 9 process of devotional service. Shavanam, Ketanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. Shavanam, constantly hearing about the Lord. Kirtanam, constantly singing and glorifying Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. Smaranam, constantly thinking of Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. Pada Sevanam, serving the lotus feet of Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. Archanam, performing deity worship that we covered in the previous verse, the process of deity worship. And Vandanam, singing prayers to Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. Dasyam, serving Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. Sakyam, being friend to Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa, being friend of Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. And Atmanivedanam, surrendering everything in the service of Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa. So that should be the attitude, not the attitude that, am I comfortable here? Is this, place where I'm enjoying my senses? That should not be the purpose, because that would be foolishness. Because materially, pain and pleasures, hot and cold, happiness and distress, they come and go, right? And in due course of time, we may see, just like the season changes, we may see these dualities changing their places. So this reminds me of a very nice story where a person, a farmer, he was engaging in devotional service. He had a spiritual master, and at the same time he was carrying out his prescribed duty as a farmer, as a Vaishya. One day what happens is his bull dies, and he would use the bull to plow the land. Now he is worried. And one thing we devotees know, every time we are bewildered, we take shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Shri Kṛṣṇa, yet at the same time we inquire from advanced devotees. So he goes to his spiritual master and says, "Oh my dear spiritual master, such a bad thing has happened, so sad." And the spiritual master says, "What happened?" Being compassionate, smiles and says, "What happened?" Showing concern. He says, "Oh, my bull died. That is such a bad thing happened." The spiritual master says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." And the old man is surprised by the response he receives. He's like, doesn't he know that, my livelihood depends on the, on a bull, and my bull is dead. I won't be able to, attain my livelihood, maintain my life. So he goes back really perplexed. And then what happens is, he comes next day and he goes to his spiritual master and says, "Oh, spiritual master, a very amazing, wonderful thing has happened." He says, "What?" He said, "My son, he was wandering in the forest, and then he was able to find a very strong horse, and he was able to subdue the horse. So now this horse has the strength of 10 bulls, so I can plow my land much faster. So this is such an amazing thing, such, so good news I want to share with you." The spiritual master says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." And now the man is really confused. The farmer says, "My spiritual master, is he not paying attention? I'm telling him such a good news, and he's saying maybe it's good and maybe it's bad. How could it be bad?" And then next day he comes back crying. He's saying, "Oh my dear spiritual master, my son, when he was riding the horse, he fell down and he broke his arm. That is so sad, my son, he has the bone broken and had to, get medical attention and all that stuff." So the spiritual master listens to it and says, "Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." Now the farmer is surprised, anticipating, because so many times his spiritual master said something which came out to be somewhat, so he's somewhat confused, right? Yet at the same time he is anticipating what does it mean. And it just so happened that the neighboring king had attacked the kingdom in which this farmer was living. And the king had, made a decree, sending out his generals and, soldiers out to the kingdom, asking a man from every family. So all the young men, they were trying to recruit for the army so they can, defend the kingdom. Now, when they come to take the Brahman or this farmer's son, they see that his hand is broken. They say, okay, he can't fight because his hand is broken. So now the man is very happy. He goes to his spiritual master and he says, so it is so wonderful that my son, he was not drafted in the army because his hand is broken. The spiritual master, what does he say? Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. So again, we should not be looking from material consciousness perspective. We should not be looking what is making us comfortable or uncomfortable in this material world. Rather, we should be, looking at why am I here? What is the purpose of this life? How can I get out of from this prison called known as this material world? How can I be free from this constant suffering? Those should be the purposes. And that can simply be attained by engaging in devotional service, by taking to the chanting of the holy name. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So, a person who is having material consciousness, right, sees duality, sees always happiness and distress, good and bad, higher and lower, comfortable and uncomfortable, enjoying and suffering, means again pain and pleasures, happiness and distress. So they must encounter, Lord Krishna says, what do they encounter? Two aspects, illusion and death. So they are first of all deluded because of the material consciousness. They are thinking that this material world is for my enjoyment. God created this material universe and then He left. And now I have to enjoy. We did discuss in UDDHAVA Gita earlier, Lord Krishna says there are two purposes of this material energy. For those for those living entities who want to enjoy and lord over this material world, they come here to enjoy. So that's a path given them, that they have been given the facility where they can enjoy. Because in the spiritual world, everyone is suffering, Lord Shri Krishna. But some living entities, they turn their back towards Lord Shri Krishna. So we have turned our back towards Lord Shri Krishna. So that's why we are in this material world. And Lord Krishna, being an affectionate Father, makes an arrangement so that we think that this material world is for our enjoyment. So we get deluded. So that's the illusory energy of Lord Shri Krishna. He reveals. And then what's the second purpose? That the devotees, that the living entities who have realized that this material world is a place of suffering and trying to enjoy and lord over this material world, one will be constantly in distress of one type of another or another. Will be constantly in anxiety, right? So they take to devotional service. And Lord Krishna gives this opportunity for us to be able to return back home. So that's also the purpose of this material universe. So material worlds, the material words and meditated upon by the material mind is not the ultimate truth. That is an important aspect we should understand. That in this material world, when we constantly meditate on various sense objects, thinking to lord over this material energy, it is not the ultimate truth. This is actually illusion. Everything is related to Lord Shri Krishna. So, material energy is an external potency, external energy of Lord Shri Krishna. So, she is real. However, the manifestations that we build because of the illusion of being conditioned in this material life, those are unreal. Those are temporary in nature. And that's why it is said that the material universe is a perverted reflection. There are perfect relationships in the spiritual world, while in this material world, because of material consciousness, we feel that the relationships are imperfect. We are not happy even though we are having such wonderful living entities, Jiva Tattva Prabhu and Nityadas. So everyone is a devotee of Lord Shri Krishna. Some know it, some don't. And being in material consciousness, we're constantly thinking, this person is higher, so I want to acquire that position. Or this person is lower materially, so I should, lord over him and lord over her, and I should use them in my service. That is the mentality. That is called material mentality. And a person with that mentality is called a materialist. So again, many times people ask, why are we talking about devotees and materialists? Right? Are they personalists or impersonalists? No, they are not. Personalists and impersonalists are both transcendentalists. Yet at the same time, the impersonalists, when they are Mayavadi, they want to merge into Brahman and become God. That is offense. So that they are offenders, because they are not materialists, but they have further committed, a higher level of offense at the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. They don't want to just, enjoy the material worlds. They want to enjoy all the universes. So that's why they are offenders. So here, the illusory reflections, they come from because of perceptions, and they lead to fear and anxiety. And this fear and anxiety stays all the way until death. And this, at the time of death, because of the fear and anxiety, they want to stay in that material consciousness, and if they stay in material consciousness, they continue to take birth in this material universe. That's why devotees, we want to see what is our benefit from the soul perspective, what is our true benefit. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyati te vishwaso gopatitve varnam tatha atmanikshepa karpane shadvita sharanagati. That's why devotees, they surrender at the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. And what are the 6 limbs of surrender? Anukulyasya sankalpa, accepting everything that is favorable to devotional service. Pratikulyasya varjanam, and rejecting everything that is unfavorable, pratikul, to the devotion service, to our devotion service. Rakshishyatiti vishvaso, understanding with great determination, with great faith that Lord Krishna will provide us all protection. Taking, his, under the protection of Lord Shri Krishna, keeping his lotus feet as umbrellas above us. Gopatitve varnam tatha, and accepting Lord's guardianship, not having a material master, but understanding Lord is the absolute master, he is the supreme master, he is the supreme personality of Godhead, and we take shelter of his lotus feet. Atmanikshepa karpaniya. Atmanikshepa is surrendering everything in the service of Lord Shri Krishna by engaging in the 9 process of devotional service, following the footsteps of acharyas, and chanting of the holy name. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And karpaniya, the 6th limb, is humility, being humble. And that is very important, right? So always thinking oneself to be more humble than the grass on the street, more tolerant than the tree. So this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealing us, right? And not expecting any respect from others, but ready to give all respect to others. But in this mood, one can continue to glorify Lord Shri Krishna, continue to engage in devotional service eternally, right? So that is the 3rd verse in Shikshashtaka. Tranadapi shunichena tarorapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. Tranadapi shunichena, thinking oneself to be more humble than the grass on the street, blade of grass. And tarorapi sahishnuna, and being more tolerant than the tree. And tree provides all kind of facilities, fruits, flowers, leaves, bark, so many medicinal things are created from the trees as well. Herbs and wood. And also, when it's alive, it provides us shade, right? And sometimes even shelter from storms and other, kind of devastating events. And amanina, not expecting respect from others. Manadena, ready to give all respect to others. Kirtaniya sadahari, one can glorify Lord eternally, sadahari. So such is the mood of devotee. So we take to surrender and understand the 6 limbs of surrender. So if you understand the Kul Mantra, Anukulyasya Sankalpa, you already are there. So that is knowing. Now comes the next part of practicing it. That will lead to realizations. So we have to understand how to serve Lord Shri Krishna with knowledge and realizations. So understanding the Sharanagati aspect is important, but practicing it is fruitful. Because if you have a recipe, of a great, wonderful dessert, knowing the recipe, think of the best dessert that you like. And think of you have been given a recipe. You go to a program and you say, people ask you, what do you like? And you say, oh, I like rasmalai, especially when it's been offered to Lord Shri Krishna. And after that, it's very nice. So they give you a recipe of rasmalai and they say, here is the rasmalai. Do you feel that? No. You really want to taste rasmalai, as prasad. So there is a difference, and that difference is knowing things and then realizing things. Jnana and Vijnana. So instead of getting the recipe, if somebody offers you that very thing, then you can appreciate it better. And even better than that is knowing the recipe, you go home and you make it. And you make it just like that, following the process. That is the important aspect. That is Vijnana. That is practical implementation, experimentation. And the interesting thing is, Krishna consciousness is a science. It's a science of self-realization. And who is the object of this science? The apparatus, everything is us, our bodies. So we carry out this experiment on ourselves and we see the purification happening. And that realization keeps us more engaged. Yesterday we talked about the science of devotional service. The next chapter we will be going deeper into the science of devotional service, because the topic of the chapter is Bhakti Yoga. And so there are so wonderful occurrences. And here we understand that how material consciousness is so dangerous, because then we will be constantly in the material pool of birth, death, old age and disease, constantly suffering. And that's why Govindas, he sings this song. Bhajahu re mana Shri Nanda Nandana Abhaya Charana Ravindare Dulabha Manava Janama Sasange Tarahu re Bhava Sindhure. Oh my dear mind, constantly sing and glorify Lord Shri Krishna, because we have received this rare human birth. And this human birth is the perfect boat that we can cross over this ocean of nations, this material universe, and go back home, back to Godhead. Shita atapa vatavarishana yedenayamini jagire Viphala sevanu kripana durjana chapala sukha labha lagire. We are constantly endeavoring in this heat and cold, in the dualities of this material world, and serving miserly, wicked persons. So we should take to devotional service. Yedana putra parijana ite ki ache parati tire Kamal dal jala jivan talamala bhajahu hari padani tire. And all these material opulences and the relatives and family that we have gathered, they're like fallen soldiers if we don't take proper care. And this life is like a water drop, like the raindrop rolls off from the surface of a lotus leaf. That is how flickering this life is. So we should take to, the chanting of the holy name, take to the shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. Shravana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Sevana Dasyare Pujana Sakhi Jana Atma Nivedana Govinda Dasa Bhilashare. So we should engage in the 9th process of devotional service. Shravana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Sevana Dasyare Pujana Sakhi Jana, again, Atma Nivedana. So these are the 9 processes of devotional service that we should constantly engage. Now this illusory energy, when Lord Krishna is revealing about this, he goes further down that why, a conditioned living entity is caught in this illusory energy and why he is so bewildered by this illusory energy. And he's identifying, just like a child creates different kind of, from the Play-Doh, creates different kind of shapes, and we can derive, we can perceive those shapes resembling something that is real, yes. Similarly, when we in this material world and we condition, we derive, those shadows, those echoes, those mirages in this material world, and we think that they are real. And when we see them, we get bewildered, we get deluded, we become fearful, we become anxious. Sometimes people say they become excited because they find, oh, this is a nice opportunity to lord over the material nature. So that should not be the attitude. Rather, one should understand that these are just perverted reflections of the material energy. And we talked about in the previous, in UDDHAVA Gita, so many times this topic has come, that the material objects, they come in very luring forms, and people get bewildered, and they are meditating on these objects, and from these objects, dhyato vishyanpamsa sangashteshu pajayate. By thinking of them, attachment develops. Sangat sangjayate kama. So sangha, from the association, from the attachment, lust develops. Kamat krodho vijayate. And from lust, anger arises. Krodad bhavati sammoha. And from krodh, from the anger, arises delusion, sammoha. And sammohat smriti brahmasat. So from the delusion, one's memory is bewildered. Smriti brahmasat buddhinasho. From the bewildered memory, one's intelligence is lost. Buddhinashat prayashyati. And when the intelligence is lost, one falls down in this material pool, ocean of distance. So how should we understand this? That is also very important. That we should understand that this is energy and energetic. They cannot be different. So Lord Krishna is the supreme energetic. And material energy, Mahamaya, is his external potency. So she cannot be different from him. So it is Lord Shri Krishna, again earlier we talked about this particular analogy, from whose body as Mahavishnu these material universes are emanating, they are coming out from his breathing and from the pores of his body. Every time he exhales, they come out, and every time he inhales, they merge back into him. So that is just like a spider. It creates this spider web from its mouth, from its saliva and so forth. It's creating this spider web, and at the end, it consumes that spider web after some time. So this material universe is coming into existence and then getting merged back into Godhead. So nothing is really getting destroyed. It's getting transformed. So what is the nature of material energy? Transformation. It's constantly transforming its shape and we get diluted. What's the nature of mind? It accepts and rejects. So again, we should always accept things that are favorable to devotional service and reject things that are unfavorable for our devotional service. So we should be, looking from that perspective. And one who is fixing his mind with the theory, with the knowledge, as well as practicing that knowledge, realizes these aspects. So that is called Vijñāna, realizations. So the realized knowledge. Such a person can wander freely just like sun. When it is said freely just like sun, because sun is shining everywhere, doesn't care if a place is dirty or if a place is clean, right? It does not discriminate. It just, spread its rays everywhere without without discriminating, and rather it purifies even the impure places. So similarly, we should be with that consciousness, constantly meditating and the lotus feet, constantly remembering his Lord Krishna's name, form, activities, pastimes, and paraphernalia, his associates and devotees. We should constantly be, carrying out activities for the benefit of ourselves and everyone around us. We should always be looking for others' benefit as well when we are seeking. But we can only seek others' benefit when we are ourselves becoming fearless. And Srila Prabhupada said that we must chant minimum 16 rounds to be able to get his protection. Once somebody asked, what do you feel when when you chant? And Srila Prabhupada responded, fearlessness. So there is no fear. And once there was a person, he was very arrogant, so Srila Prabhupada asked him, he was saying, I don't fear. Srila Prabhupada says, so do you stop at the traffic light? He said, yes. And Prabhupada said, then you fear, because you are fearful that if you try to cross traffic light, if the signal is red, then you may be hit by another person. So the person got bewildered and he accepted. Afterwards, but again, one of the aspects is we devotees stop at the traffic light because we are honest citizens, we follow the rules and regulations, and understanding that it's only the material energy that is doing all these activities. And we are just carrying out our duties so that we can use this body, human form of life, as a perfect boat to cross over this ocean of nations. So we also want to fly under the radar, not to get bewildered by the illusory energy, not be caught in its dualities, yet engage in devotional service. Anukulyasya sankalpa. So we do favorable activities for our devotional service. That's our main focus. And reject all the unfavorable things and activities that are unfavorable to our devotional service. So there are two aspects in this material world. Srila Jiva Goswami, he reveals that dualities in this material world, happiness and distress, heat and cold, all these things, the dualities, they are basically lost in time. So in due course of time, hot becomes cold, summer goes, winter comes. And in due course of time, if you are having, happiness now, you may feel pain after some time. So again, those are dualities of this material world. They come and go. Matra spashastu kanteya shitoshino sukha dukkha agma apayino anitya stam titikshasva bharata. Lord Kṛṣṇa, in his instruction to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, reveals that just like the passing of these seasons of summer and winter, similarly the happiness and distress that we experience in this material world, it comes and goes. Agama apayino, it comes and goes. Anityas, they're temporary in nature. So he is revealing again and again in Bhagavad Gita, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Acharyas are giving us these instructions again and again that we should be very careful and not be caught up in these dualities. Rather, we should stay stable no matter what the case is. So this is where, somebody could say an intelligent businessman in a stock market makes profit no matter what is happening. So an intelligent businessman, economist, would look at if the market is up, he's making profit. If the market is down, he's making profit. So if there is happiness in this material life, we, actually when it is distressful in this material life, we remember Lord Shri Krishna. And when we are happy, we remember even more. So again, we are constantly engaged in remembering and serving Lord Shri Krishna, which starts simply by calling out in this, like a child, Srila Prabhupada says, we should call out to the Lord just like a child calls out to its mother. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Chant and be happy. That's the simple mantra. So by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Acharyas, by the mercy of Lord Shri Krishna, we are so fortunate that we have received this benediction that we can take to the chanting and the devotional service, always praying out. So it's also Vandanam. So that is, again, means to an end and end itself. Those are the things that are being touched again and again in this particular chapter. So the dualities of this material world, they are temporary in nature and we always see different phases. So they are constantly being, lost in time. Their time is the, Lord Krishna says, time I am, right? Devourer of all things. So all dualities that we see in this material world, they are being, constantly changing and they are constantly switching, temporary in nature. And then if one thinks that this material world is different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is hallucination. Srila Jiva Goswami reveals that that is illusory energy of Lord Shri Krishna. He actually reveals in the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam, Aham eva sameva jnāna. So again, there he is telling us that this material energy of mind, if one thinks the fourth shloka, is basically, if someone thinks that this anything that is different from him, separate from him, it is his illusory energy. So such a person is under the illusory energy. That is like, we are looking at the sun and saying in the morning, is sun out there? And somebody says, no, sun is not out here, it's cloudy. It is not, the clouds are not covering the sun, the clouds are covering us. The sun is not affected by clouds. There are no suns, there cannot be any any clouds on the sun planet, on sun star. So here, this has been revealed. And when we talk about perverted reflection, sometimes people challenge. They say, oh, if everything is perverted reflection of the spiritual world, and if there is distress here, there has to be distress there. We say it's not always true. Just like in this material world, we see, in the material universe, we see clouds, right? So in the sky, when we see clouds, but who is the cause of these clouds? Who is the cause? It is because of sun that the water has vaporized and has taken the form of cloud. And yet at the same time, there cannot be any cloud on the sun. We understand this aspect very simply. Yet at the same time, the cause of the cloud is sun. But that cloud is on the earthly planet, not on the sun star. So again, not on sun. So that is very important for us to understand. That it is, the pervertedness is in the material universes. Everything is clear, everything is shining, everything is bright in the spiritual world. So one who is situated is also free from such delusions. If one who is situated in Krishna consciousness rightly and constantly meditating, Mayyeva madhadasva, May buddhim nivesha, constantly remembering Lord Shri Krishna, constantly engaging in devotional service, cannot be in delusion, because he is properly situated in his position. Jivera Sarupaya Krishna Nityadas. He is performing his eternal religion, Sanatana Dharma. So now his prescribed duties are completely aligned with his eternal religion, Sanatana Dharma. And that is true Krishna consciousness. So two aspects that we just covered. One is dualities, they are lost in time, they're temporary in nature. And anything that we think is separate from Lord Shri Krishna, that is hallucination. These two aspects have been revealed by Srila Jiva Goswami. Now Uddhava is curious. He's hearing these nice, deity worship instructions and how one gets bewildered and how one should not get bewildered. So he asks, then my dear Lord Shri Krishna, the living entity you said does not mix with the body, right? It does not mix with these material elements. Living entity is transcendental in nature. It is pure, it's illuminating, it is full in knowledge. And then, having fallen in this material world, accepts different conditioned bodies. Now, bodies are coming from the material nature. And material nature, by its very behavior, is dull in it, right? It doesn't have its consciousness. The consciousness in this body is because of the presence of soul. So the cause is soul, the effect is consciousness. So that's how we know that there is a living entity in this body. If living entity leaves a body, then it turns into a dry, dead matter. And matter has no consciousness, it's jara. So from that perspective, who is having these perceptions of this material world? Who is really suffering? Who is really enjoying? Is it the body that's enjoying, or is it the body that is suffering? Or is it the soul that is enjoying or suffering? So again, he's asking whether it's body enjoying or is it the soul enjoying. So those aspects he's asking. And he has already identified the nature and the characteristics of both types. Now Lord Krishna goes on elaborating how one should differentiate soul from the body. Because he is very happy that Uddhava is asking it for our benefit. That, why is one deluded in this material world? And he is saying that a foolish conditioned soul, he is engaged in various kind of material activities. We have received this body and being conditioned when we think that I am this body and we want to enjoy the senses, we engage in sense gratification, then we seek fruitive work, right? We engage in fruitive activities. because we are attached to the fruits that we get from those activities. So in this way, we are running after performing fruitive activities, running after the fruits. And such a person is, constantly endeavoring and sometimes even seen to prosper, but such prosperity of the body and of bodily conditions in this material world is ultimately useless. And this has been also referred so many times in the scriptures as pavarga. So what is pavarga? So in Hindi alphabet sequence, pa, pa, ba, bha, ma, these 5 appears. Pa is for parishram. So a person in material consciousness wanting to enjoy, in this material world, seeking sense gratification, engages in fruitive activities. So he has to engage in endeavor, heavy endeavor, fruitive endeavors. So this is pa, is for parishram. So he has to over endeavor and seeking the fruits of those activities. That's why they are called fruitive activities. He wants to enjoy for senses, so he's putting himself in the center. So pa. So when you are over endeavoring, just like if you make a horse run a lot of time, a foam starts forming in the mouth. And when you over endeavor, that happens again. So pa is phena. Phena is like the, because of the over endeavor, that phena, the effects of tiredness and lethargy and all those effects come up. That's phena, foaming of the mouth. Bha. So this is pa, pa, ba. So this is bewilderment. Brahmit. So again, one becomes bewildered in this material world because seeking the fruits by engaging in fruitive activities, doing over endeavor, engaging yourself, and then whatever fruit you get, suddenly as soon as you get those fruits, they lose their value. That's like child looking for a toy, is crying for a toy, and as soon as you hand the toy to the child looks at the toy, plays it for a little time, and then he's not interested in this toy anymore. He's looking for another toy. That is like in the material world, the target is always moving. So this is where a living entity becomes bewildered. He gets bewildered, and in due course of time, he becomes fearful. Bha is for bhai. He becomes fearful, being so bewildered, trying to understand what is going on. He's constantly anxious, right? And chinta chita ke saman hoti hai. So chinta, anxiety is just like death, but actually it's worse than death. So we studied this in India in our 8th grade class, that there is only a difference of a dot between chinta and chitta. Chinta is anxiety and chitta is the fire, that's when the body is burned, that fire. So while that fire that burns the body is burning the body after the soul has left, but chinta, the anxiety, burns us even when we are alive. So it is very important for us to get out of this anxiety. And finally, he meets death. Pa, pa, ba, bha, ma. Ma is for mrityu. Mrityu means death. So that is the state of a living entity who is seeking sense gratification in this material world. So that's why the material world is said to be, ashashvatam, and temporary in nature, as well as dukkhalayam. It's a place of misery. Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. Because the living entity looks at this material world for sense enjoyment. And in this way, one wanders in this world like a Ferris wheel, constantly going up and down. Now, the real spiritual knowledge, Lord Krishna says, is discriminating spirit from matter. Understanding what is matter, to understand that matter is to be used in Krishna consciousness. And spirit, we as living entities and other living entities around us, should be engaged in Krishna consciousness. So that is the purpose of this life. We should be able to discriminate. Then Lord Krishna continues to say, just like gold is there in the beginning, then a jeweler, he makes various kind of ornaments, jewels, and jewelry and so forth. And then at the end, this jewelry is all melted away, and finally the gold remains. So somebody can say, well, there is gold in the beginning and there is gold at the end. And in the middle also it is gold. Of course, one can understand from observation. So similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, he exists in the beginning, he exists at the end. And of course in the middle also he exists. So he is constantly existing. Advaitam achyutam anadim anantarupam adyam purana purusham navyavanam cha vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakta govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. So Lord Shri Krishna is Advaitam. So he is, there is no one equal to him. He is the oldest person and he is unlimited forms. He has unlimited expansions. Adyam Purana Purusham, and he is the oldest person. Navyavanam cha. So when we talk of old, sometimes we think an old person, but no, he is the oldest of all, yet he has a youthful body. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham. It is very difficult to approach him with Vedas, right? With the knowledge of the Vedas, because a person seeking Vedas sometimes is engaging in fruitive activities. Adurlabham atma bhakta. But a devotee can easily attain him, right? Because he is seeking to please Lord Shri Krishna. He is looking after his ultimate benefit, which is Jivera Surupure Krishna Nityadas. By engaging in devotional service, he is serving Lord Shri Krishna. And this is Lord Brahma praying, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I pray, I worship Lord Shri Krishna, who is also known as Govinda. Govinda means one who gives pleasure to the senses and pleasure to the cows. So the three phases of mind, the material mind, have been revealed, right? Just like we talked about the phases of living entity, that it is transcendental to the three modes of material nature, it is pure, it has full knowledge and so forth. We also need to know what is the nature. We know the nature of mind is to accept and reject, but what are the phases of material mind? So it is basically, wakefulness, sleep and deep sleep. And we talked about this earlier also, because of the three modes of material nature. In the mode of goodness, one is awake. And in the mode of passion, one is sleeping and like dreaming state. And in mode of ignorance, one is in deep sleep, so that is dreamless state. Hare Krishna. So these phases of mind are because of the influence of material nature. The three modes of material nature, Sattva Guna, Raja Guna and Tama Guna. So in Sattva Guna mode of goodness, one is awake and he has an opportunity to realize. He has an opportunity. He doesn't realize yet. He has an opportunity to realize the religious principles. And he engages in understanding the four limbs, which is austerity, cleanliness, mercy and truthfulness. So these are the four limbs of religious religion. So from that perspective, he has an opportunity. So he is awake. But one who is dreaming, right? He is imagining different kind of objects and different kind of distress and unfavorable, undesirable things in dreams. But one, that is in the mode of passion. One is very much looking at the dualities, not looking at everyone with that equal vision, but making differentiation, because the focus is on name, fame and glories. How can I be happy here? How can I enjoy here? How can I be, Lord of everyone? How can I be in the center? So there is enough to meet the need of everyone in this planet, on this planet, or in this material universe. But there is not enough even to meet the greed of one living entity in this material universe. So that is the true understanding, to be able to differentiate matter from spirit and understand that we should not be falling down. And mode of ignorance, one is thinking that whatever they are doing is all in all. They don't want to really seek for the advancement in spiritual knowledge, and they don't even want to understand what is right or wrong. So that is in the mode of ignorance, that is like deep sleep, where there is no dream happening, they are completely dull. So they have taken to the nature of this material world, right? Material nature, like an object. The consciousness is completely covered. And then Lord Krishna, he is saying that it is the absolute truth. We talked about that the energetic and energy is not different, no, they cannot be separated. So using his external potency, Lord Krishna is exhibiting himself in the material variety, and as the sense objects, the mind and various, like the false ego and so forth, and one gets bewildered. And we should understand what is the unique position of Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so we should expertly refute misidentification with the matter and cut to pieces any doubt that we have about our identity. Sarvopadeva nirmuktam yat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktiruchyate. Give up all kind of upadhis, all kind of designations that we get from this material body. Thinking of oneself, what are the different kind of designations one can have? One can think of, this person is American, this person is Indian, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a, strong, I'm young, I'm old. Well, these are all related to the body, right? I'm white, I'm black, I'm brown, I'm yellow, means all those designations are with respect to body. I'm a father, I'm a son, again, those are again relations to the body. And so one should not be associating with the body, thinking it's all in all. So we have to give up all kind of designations and engage in serving Lord Hrishikesha, master of the senses, the way he desires, favorably. That is Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. So that is the proper way of serving in devotion. So we should be looking from that perspective and understanding that this material body and its elements are not the true self. They are temporary in nature, they are constantly transforming, and we don't have to identify with it. And similarly, just like the sky is never entangled with any of the quality of air, fire, water and earth, right, which it contains, as well as the seasonal heat and cold. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, he is above the three modes of material nature, and he is never entangled, even though he is the cause of this material energy, and he is the cause of why all these different type of manifestations are happening and all these dualities that we are observing. Yet at the same time, he is above them. We should not think that he has come under the three modes of material nature. So that's also one should understand. One must avoid the modes until firmly practicing devotional service to Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there is a warning even to the devotees given. Lord Krishna is revealing that if your mind is not under your control, if you are not fully situated in your position as devotee, we should always be careful, we should always be attentive, because Maya is lurking at every step. Padam padam yata vipadam natesham. So Maya is constantly lurking and there is danger at every step. So we should be very much attentive to every activity, every moment in our life, and there is always a need to remember Lord Shri Krishna. And thus, constantly engaging in devotional service will automatically attain fearlessness. Right. So we should always be, careful about the things that are happening. And there is a very nice story given. Srila Prabhupada would tell this story often to help us understand what is of importance in this life. So when there was this nice scholarly man, he was visiting his village, after many years. So he was going to his village, he had to cross a river. So to cross a river, he looks for a boatman, he finds a boatman. He says, "Oh, I want to go to my village, could you help me cross the river?" The boatman says, "This is my purpose, for a small wager, I do help people cross. I'm always looking for passengers to cross the river." So this man, he says, he's very happy that he found a boatman. He gets onto the boat, and the boatman is rowing, to the other bank of the river. And it so happened as this man, he wants to have some nice conversation. So he talks to the boatman. He says, "Oh, do you know how the stars and the various planets, they move in the sky?" The boatman says, "No, sir, I'm an illiterate. I do not know how to do that." And then this man says, "Oh, 25% of your life is wasted." And then, to continue the conversation, he says, "Oh, do you know how the wind moves and how there is clouds in the sky and how, like heat and cold and the different seasons come and go?" The boatman says, "I'm sorry, sir, I'm an illiterate, I do not know." He says, "Oh, 50% of your life is wasted." And then looking up, this scholarly man, he says, "Oh, you see the clouds, how they are forming and how they are getting dark and the wind is blowing. Do you know how this is happening?" The boatman says, "I'm sorry, sir, I'm illiterate, I do not know." It's like 75% of your life is wasted. Now it just so happens that it starts to thunderstorm. and the winds are blowing very strong and it starts to rain, torrential rain is falling. So with this torrential rainfall, the boatman asked this man, "Sir, do you know how to swim?" The scholarly man says, "I'm sorry, I do not know how to swim." Well, the boatman says, "Now that the storm is here, 100% of your life is wasted, because we have to now swim across the river." And he jumps in the river, the boatman, and crosses the river. So it is also very important that instead of looking at various things, just acquiring knowledge and becoming very proud of our material positions and conditions in this material world, we should be looking at crossing this ocean of nescience. And that's why Srila Prabhupada said that East and West, they have this perfect combination. While there are so many advancements that are happening in the West, one has to use these facilities that we get because of the material advancement, and with the vision of the spiritual knowledge of the East, we can easily combine the two to attain great benefit. And when we were children, we read this story about a man who was blind and another man who was lame, he didn't have legs. So they wanted to go to a fair. How did they go to the fair? So the blind man says to the other man who was, who had eyes but could not walk, he says, "Why don't you climb my shoulders? So you can tell me the way and I will walk. So I'll use my legs and you use your vision, and together we'll have this perfect combination." So that is the combination that Srila Prabhupada instructs us to use the knowledge of, and material advancement of the West and the spiritual knowledge and enlightenment from the East, from Bhagavad Gita, from Srimad Bhagavatam, from Chaitanya Charitamrita, these amazing literatures and the spiritual knowledge that we receive through these bona fide scriptures, through the bona fide devotees, the spiritual masters, we would be able to cross this ocean of nescience and reach our destination without fail in this very life. So that is the great boon. And when we take the shelter of Lord Shri Krishna, he is just like sun. Krishna Surya Sama Maya He Andhakara, Jahan Krishna Tahan Nahi Maya Rahdikara. Lord Krishna is like the sun. And when the sun rises, all darkness, the night, is driven away. And everything becomes clear. And one is able to see everything clearly. So yes, we are not looking at perverted reflections, rather we are looking at real things. What is true happiness? What is transcendental bliss? What is, full knowledge? What is, enlightenment? We are experiencing this, and we experience this with the most important thing that we are looking as a goal of our life, love of Godhead. We really become, situated in a position, and with love, with gratitude, with humility, we serve Lord Shri Krishna, who is like the sun driving away all the darkness and ignorance from our life. So from Lord Shri Krishna comes everything that we get. The power of speech comes from him, the life here that makes us survive in this material world, this body, that comes from him. Everything that we get comes from him. So that is a very important realization. Srila Prabhupada, he was once, in Mayapur, and he was, taking a walk, and there was a gentleman, a merchant from Calcutta. He was visiting as well. He was a pious man. So Srila Prabhupada asked him, "So what do you do?" He says that I make glass. I have a glass industry. So Srila Prabhupada says, "Where does glass come from?" He was a pious man, so he said, "Glass comes from silicon." And then, to make it very clear, he says, "It comes from sand." We say sand is, silicon comes from sand, so finally it's sand. And then Srila Prabhupada smiled and said, "Where does sand comes from?" Being pious, he said, "Well, sand comes from Lord Shri Krishna, means he provides us everything." So Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, so you are a thief? You're stealing from Lord Shri Krishna." So everybody laughed, and even he laughed. And then he went to the back of the crowd. And after some time, when they were returning back to the temple, he came again in the front, and he says, "But Srila Prabhupada, I also give in charity. I donate, Lakshmi for temple construction and other projects." Srila Prabhupada says, so you're a small thief. Small thief means you don't keep everything. You keep some, but you also return back to Krishna. And so everybody laughed, and he also laughed. So that is the proper understanding, that everything we are getting from Lord Shri Krishna. So everything should be used for his satisfaction, to please Lord Shri Krishna. So we should dovetail everything to please Lord Shri Krishna, and that is true Krishna consciousness, not for our sense enjoyment. When we serve Lord Shri Krishna, then we get transcendental bliss. We get happiness that the materialists cannot even perceive. Forget about experiencing it. They can't even perceive. And that's why they are sometimes bewildered. They think that the devotees are poor people, they are lazy people, they are dull people, they got nothing else to do, maybe they don't want to do. They don't realize that devotees work harder than materialists. In today's times, householder devotees, they work so much hard. They carry out their job with honesty, as well as they engage in devotional service, and yet at the same time they continue to have loving relationship with the family members. The focus is love, not lust. It is the mood of giving, not taking. It is the mood of accepting, not snatching. So again, that is the mood of a devotee. So in today's times, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the bona fide spiritual masters, that we are able to experience such transcendental bliss in this very life. And the conditioning of the mind causes all the bewilderment, so we want to not be bewildered. So that's why on special days, festival days like Ekadashi and Janmashtami and Damodar Mas, we chant minimum of 25 rounds. Why? Because we want to seek more and more shelter. We want to upavas. Upavas means staying close under the shelter of Lord Shri Kṛṣna. That's why we should constantly chant and engage in devotional service on Ekadashis. So there are various, now Lord Kṛṣna, he understands that Uddhav understands it well, he has elaborated, but there are other yoga systems also. And he had clearly made in this particular chapter the distinction between Jnāna-yoga and devotional service. But there is another yoga system we will get bewildered with, which is Ashtanga yoga system. Taking care of different kind of postures, asanas, and pranayam, the breathing exercises, pratyahara, to detaching from the various sense objects and so forth. Finally going up to the samadhi stage. So yam, niyam, pranayam, pratyahara, asanas, and dharan and samadhi and so forth. So those stages, he starts addressing those. That people who think that those processes are to keep your body healthy, to keep it disease free, to seek that end, they are immature people. Right? That's an immature yogi. He has not fully realized the purpose of that yoga system. We devotees, when we perform similar exercises, we keep ourselves body healthy and clean. We do it so that we can engage in devotional service. While a materialist, when they are doing this Ashtanga yoga, they are following, that is to stay strong, to have strong body, and they use that body to engage in fruitive activities so that they can acquire various kind of results, fruitive results, and they use it for sense gratification. That is immaturity, that is bewilderment, and that is conditioning. So that has been explained again and again. And such scholars sometimes, when they try to preach to others that the purpose of your life is to engage, to become disease free, to live happily, and then they try to divide people. Well, devotees, they want to unite everyone. Srila Prabhupada, when he was visited United Nations, they were performing in the early days. This is in the early days. They were telling and they were sharing pamphlets that real unity is under God, under the shelter of Lord Shri Kṛṣna. When United Nations, he pointed to the various flags. He said that, see, there's so many flags. Every nation has their own flag. This is not united. They're actually divided, gathering at one place. So we have to understand from the perspective that a devotee is seeking everyone to unite under one goal, understanding that God is one, God is great, and we are meant to serve God. That is our true nature, and that is what will make us happy. Anand bhaya abhyasat, we are constantly seeking happiness. Living entities everywhere are seeking happiness, how to be happy. And the true happiness, the transcendental bliss, can only be experienced when we engage in devotional service, not by seeking sense gratification. And so we should take to proper understanding. So again, that is being again and again identified, that the United Nations is not really united. And people who are materially driven, they are constantly dividing people in the name of nationalism, capitalism, and socialism even. And there are so many other aspects they create, which is just an extension of their body. They are basically seeking sense gratification at the end. How to lord over this material nature, that is their goal. And that is a great loss, because it is not the ultimate benefit of oneself. It is not benefit for humanity or even for the very being who is engaged in those activities. So now, near the end of the chapter, Lord Kṛṣna, he is revealing that these inauspicious disturbances, they can be gradually removed by constant remembrance of me, by constantly remembering his name, form, activities and pastimes, by congregational hearing, and chanting of my holy names. So Sankirtan Yajna is the Yajna for this age. So why sometimes when we say Sankirtan Yajna is Yajna of this age, and people are so much driven towards, hey, let's have a Yajna of fire sacrifice and then let's perform this Yajna. They are so much driven by this, not realizing that actually it is Sankirtan Yajna, is the proper Yajna for the Kali age. Krite tadadhyayate vishnum tretayam yajato make dvapare paricharyayam kalau tadhari kirtana. So in all the 4 ages, there are different kind of yajnas that have been identified. They should be carried out to attain perfection in this very life. So in the Satyuga, Krita Yuga, everyone was born as realized persons. So they were called Harshas, right? Because the Hamsas. So they were already realized and they were constantly engaged in devotional service. And they could perform austerities for tens of thousands of years. That's why at that time, tapa, austerity was the focus. So they could meditate on the name, form, activities, pastimes of Lord Shri Kṛṣna and attain perfection. Yet even there we see Vishwamitra, after 60,000 years of meditation, fell down when Menaka arrived and bewildered his memory and intelligence. So that is where in Krita Yuga one could attain perfection by meditation. Prachitas attained by perfection by meditating for 10,000 years under the water. We can't survive under the water, we understand. We don't have 10,000 years to meditate on. So after that age, Krita age, Satyuga age, came Treta Yuga. So in Satyuga, austerity was there, but in Treta Yuga, austerity went away. So the austerity as a religious limb was lost. What was remaining? Cleanliness, mercy and truthfulness. So cleanliness was there, so you could perform fire sacrifices. Tretayam yajatom, okay, so there you could perform fire sacrifices. So it was in Treta Yuga, Vishwamitra was engaged in fire sacrifices and he sought protection of Lord Ramchandra and Lord Lakshman to save the ashrams from getting polluted by the demoniac forces. So yajnas were used in the Treta Yuga. And in the Treta Yuga, one could attain perfection by doing fire sacrifices, by putting oblations in the fire. And when you chant those mantras, they end with Swaha. Swaha is the wife of Yajna Purusha. And who is Yajna Purusha? Lord Kṛṣna himself. Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam Sarvalok Maheshwaram Surhidam Sarva Bhutanam Gyatva Maham Shantim Richati. Lord Kṛṣna reveals in Bhagavad Gita that I am the beneficiary of all sacrifices. Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam. So he is the Bhokta, he is the beneficiary of all fire sacrifices, all sacrifices rather. So here, but with the coming of Dwapar Yuga, as Treta Yuga finished, cleanliness was lost and remaining was mercy and truthfulness. So mercy was there. Dwapare parichayam. So people start going on various pilgrimages, going to holy places. Vidurji, he went on pilgrimage. Balaramji went on pilgrimage. So many, and even Arjun went on pilgrimage, year-long pilgrimage. So people would go on pilgrimage to attain perfection. So by going to pilgrimage meant they would go to the holy places, holy dham, and associate with the devotees, receive instructions, like Vidurji received instructions from Markandeya. Arjun received instructions from many personalities, including Lord Shri Kṛṣna again and again. So there is a purpose why someone would go on pilgrimage, to associate with the devotees, to take their instructions and to purify one's existence by engaging in devotional service. That is the purpose of going to dham and residing at dham. So, and with the going of Dwapar Yuga came Kali Yuga, and this is when Shukdev Goswami was reciting Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj, and this is where we are studying Srimad Bhagavatam, where it comes from. And that was with the coming of Kali age, mercy is gone. The only thing remaining is truthfulness. And with as Kali Yuga advances, even truthfulness vanishes. So in this is Kala Tat Hari Kirtanat. Congregational chanting is the sacrifice for Kali age. So we should all get together and chant the holy name. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So Lord Krishna is revealing in this chapter that just like a tree seasonally bears fruit, we should understand that the fruit is only seasonal. It comes and then it stays for some time, then it's lost. Similarly, the soul is eternal, constantly stays, just like the tree. So again, tree also you can argue, but this is an analogy. So it is used as an analogy to help us understand the nature of the soul, that soul is eternal, while the body that we get, these material bodies, they are temporary in nature. Rather, we want to be spiritually situated in our spiritual bodies, which are also, eternal in nature. So we should be looking from that perspective, and should not be looking to just make this body healthy, make this body strong. It reminds me of a very nice story. Once there was a person in a village. He wanted to really go after his name, fame, and glory. So he says, I see that these sadhus, they are really, revered. Means again, they're really regarded very highly. So he goes and joins an ashram, and after some time he returns to the village and he says, I want to show you something. And then he gathers everyone at the river bank, and then he shows, I'm going to walk on water. And then he walks on water and he comes back. And when he comes back, the old man of the village, all the young kids and householders, people are impressed. He can walk on water. That is great. And an old man, he suddenly says, but what's the use of walking on water? I can just pay 2 rupees to a boatman. He can help me cross the river. What is the purpose you are going to attain by walking on water? And this is where you have spent so many years to just learn how to walk on water. What was the purpose, right? What is the goal? What is it that you want to attain? So this is also, we have to understand things. When we are engaged in an activity, what is the purpose behind activity? Why are we doing an activity? We should understand. So when we understand the essence, that's the spirit behind an activity. And an activity is actually a ritual. It's following a process. So when we combine spirit with ritual, it becomes spiritual. That is the true essence. And this is where Lord Krishna reveals the blessing in this chapter, that the yogi who has taken shelter of me remains free from hankering, right? Because he experiences the happiness of the soul within. Now, hankering comes because of aspiring something, right? Or having not achieved something in the past. So aspiring something in the future or not achieving something in the past. So all that anxiety and hankering goes away. Thus, while executing this process of yoga, so which process? Devotional service, bhakti yoga. The yogi is never defeated by obstacles. So one can continue to endeavor rightfully in one's position, engaging in devotional service. So that is an important aspect that we should not have to worry about when we are engaged in devotional service. Brahma bhuta prasannatma na shochate na kankshati sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. So one is situated in Brahman stage. Brahman stage is Brahma bhuta. He is prasannatma. He is constantly rejoicing. He is happy. He is experiencing transcendental bliss. Na shochati na kankshati. He does not lament about the past, what he could have achieved, and na kankshati. He does not aspire for the future. So don't think of the past that is gone or the future that sleeps, but rather focus in the present. Samaha sarveshu bhuteshu. He is equally disposed towards all living entities, understanding that every living entity is an eternal servant of Lord Shri Krishna, and Lord Krishna is residing in every living entity's heart as super soul. Sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhakti labhate param. And he is constantly engaged in my devotional service with love, with gratitude, with humility, with tolerance, with this affection that my only shelter is the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. So in that way, we would never be defeated by any obstacles, because even if we are immature, Lord Krishna reveals in the middle of the chapter that an immature yogi may sometimes be bewildered because of family attachment, because of disciples. That's what got my attention. That sometimes one could even be bewildered in this material world because of having too many disciples, being attached to those disciples and being served by those disciples and enjoying the service of those disciples and the various facilities those disciples are providing and the things that they are providing, and making sure that that respect that they are giving. Sometimes even that material energy puts another snare, another trap on us. So we have to be very, very careful not to be attached. But he is saying that even though such person may attach and faces death and may have to born again, but by his mercy such a person is quickly able to get to his position that he had attained in this by performing devotional service in this previous life. He can come to that position and they are not at all obstructed by those simpler happenings in that next life, and they are able to advance further unhindered in devotional service. So that is such a wonderful blessing that he is sharing near this end. And this is going to lead us into Bhakti Yoga, the next chapter. So here Lord Krishna in this chapter he summarized all the knowledge that we have been discussing, the Jnāna-yoga processes in Srimad Bhagavatam till this point, especially in UDDHAVA Gita from chapter 5th all the way till chapter 27. He is summarizing all that knowledge aspect and how one has to come to the realization and properly engage in devotional service by calling out to the Lordship. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. This is where the chapter ends. Gadra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrind ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Kṛṣṇa.
Hare Krishna.